all so much for joining our webinar today, Streamlining Salesforce Development and Testing with Flosum and Provar. I'm Lauren Danduszewski. I'm one of the partnership leaders at Flosum, been here for almost 3 years, and I'm going to be our host and moderator today. We're together for about an hour. We left about 15 minutes for a nice, healthy Q&A session, but the brunt of the call, we're going to spend 10 minutes or so going through an introduction to our speakers, to Flosum, to Provar. So we'll give you a warm intro. We'll talk through our partnership, why we partnered, how we've achieved joint success. We'll also touch on the benefits of our technical partnership, which really enables enhanced collaboration between dev and QA teams, along with a shared dedicated focus on quality and security. So we'll touch on that. We'll spend 10 minutes or so on the quality lifecycle and continuous deployment. We'll show some visuals around how to achieve end-to-end visibility and traceability across the development lifecycle, from coding to testing and deployment. And then we'll get into a demo, which should take us around 15 minutes. So all of that should be about 45 minutes, leaving plenty of time for a Q&A. So let's get started with some introductions. We have Mayank Singh, who is a Salesforce architect and director leading Flosum's customer success technology team. He has over 8 years of experience at Flosum and plays a very pivotal role in ensuring the success of our customers. Next, we have Patrick Blahowski. He leads sales for Flosum and has been a leader in the DevOps space for over 15 years. He's considered an expert in helping companies change the way they work through automation practices, building world-class Salesforce development lifecycles, saving companies millions of dollars a year. Welcome, Patrick. And Michael Daly, last but not least, works at Provar as Director of Technical Product Marketing, where he facilitates market feedback to product teams, then works with internal teams on enablement for features and integrations. He started his professional career as a full-stack developer and automation engineer before moving to DevOps and testing full-time at Provar. He's been with Provar for nearly 6 years and is a travel and food enthusiast. With that, I'm going to actually hand it over to you, Patrick, to introduce Flosum.
Great. Thanks a lot, Lauren. That was a great introduction. Appreciate everybody spending some time with us today. It's going to be a fun-filled session here for the next hour. So a little bit about Flosum. Flosum specializes in automated software delivery for the Salesforce ecosystem. And we partner with Provar here on the testing side to really provide best-of-breed solutions so that customers can build great software development life cycles to quickly release software more frequently with lowered risk. At Flosum, our founder really realized when he worked for Salesforce that they had a major gap in software delivery. Environments were hard to manage, they were complex, teams are big, and that there were no patterns that were scalable and repeatable. These problems still consist today without products like Flosum. We still see lots of low IT performing companies struggle at version control and software delivery, which leads to slow deployment times, low deployment frequencies, and lots of rework. The market has this mindset that if they can just take their current DevOps processes and apply it to their Salesforce ecosystem, it's going to work, which we all know doesn't. So what Flosum did is created a suite and platform of products to help address this within the Salesforce ecosystem around software delivery. The first one is our bread and butter, our Flosum DevOps solution that aids in native version control and release management. This product handles your DevOps needs for metadata and code with unique capabilities to avoid things like overwrites and failed deployments, all while enforcing governance and compliance. Our next product is around sandbox seeding. We know this can be a challenge in the marketplace. Most companies need to seed sandboxes and mask data and update configuration settings, which our product data migrator makes super easy and simple. We also are taking market share with our backup and archiving product, which has become more critical since the acquisition of Own Backup with Salesforce. If you don't have a backup solution in place, you're really exposing your organization to major risks. So please reach out to us to learn more about that product. Love to talk to you about it. Our last product is Trust Center, and that's around security posturing. It's also a very important part of the Salesforce ecosystem for audit, scanning, and compliance purposes. Typical challenges that we see in the market place are lack of version control. Customers either have no version control in place or have mismanaged Git repositories. Rollbacks are non-existent in the CI/CD process. When a problem occurs, it can take hours or days to resolve. Companies still have a lot of manual processes in place for deployments, which lead to bad practices and single deployments. Teams are growing and complexity is increasing. This is causing a lot of patterns that are not scalable or repeatable. So Flosum can help by putting in native version control. This gives historic tracking and consistency throughout the SDLC. Peer reviews can easily be managed, pushing changes into production. We actually let you push changes automatically between sandboxes with ease. Flosum makes rolling back changes super easy, so you don't need to be up at 3 a.m. watching your deployments happen. Flosum's simple. Somebody without Git experience can actually integrate into your workflow and quickly get up to speed. Building features together will become a best practice for you, saving valuable time and resources. And last but not least, we have a dedicated team of advisors that can help you with your DevOps journey. Speaking of DevOps journeys, if you've ever followed the DevOps organizational research assessment from Google, you'll see that there are multiple variations between a low IT performer and an elite performer like a FANG company that really knows and understands how to build a good software factory. So we take a different approach here. We relate it to go walking before you run. Software only gets you so far. So with Flosum and Provar, we can maybe get you to go twice as fast with our software out of the box. But we want you to go 10 or 20 times faster. And in order to do that, you need to work on your maturity modeling that reflects culture change, that gets you to do your workflows in a different kind of way. So in this slide, we're showcasing Flosum's role in guiding organizations through a structured DevOps maturity journey from initial chaos to peak efficiency. Really what this does is illustrates a clear progression through distinct changes, highlighting gradual implementation of best practices and automation. The ultimate goal here is to allow Flosum to drive innovation and business value with you to get you to go 10 or 20 times faster. So specific talking points around this are the first stage would be aspiring. Many organizations start with little or no defined DevOps processes. I'm sure if you've been doing this for a while, you've all been here. Change sets are often made directly in production, causing conflicts and instability. Manual testing seems to be the norm here. This will slow down releases and it will hinder agility throughout the process. The next phase, typically we see customers going on is the starting phase, where organizations begin exploring tools and processes focused around version control. They'll start utilizing change sets and potentially a DevOps center for better collaboration. And lots of our customers are starting in phase 2 here. The next one's building, where DevOps processes become more defined, where you can really start focusing on user stories. Organizations will implement a delivery tool and certain testing methodologies. This will help individual developer sandboxes and peer code reviews get introduced into the process. The next phase is refine, and this is where the DevOps process is really fully optimized. We can help enable you get the innovation and higher quality standards within those release cycles. In this phase, organizations will leverage their CD tools to do static code analysis and also backup and restoring data. And then last but not least is in the leading phase. And that's a strong security posture can be established here so you can scan and do incident response plans. This one's more around the people, process, and technology are maximized for you to help create that business value. So no matter where you are in the journey, Flosum and Provar can really work with you on these overall objectives. All right, so everybody knows AI is a hot topic right now, and Flosum's next generation AI platform is natively built right in Salesforce, and it leverages Salesforce's Agentforce as the LLM. The value is really around developer productivity and security posturing. So this AI interface allows you to ask Agentforce a question at any time and get an answer, which is really cool. Wouldn't it be awesome if you could use our code documenter agent to generate code documentation automatically right in Salesforce? Or if you could possibly use our security analyst to highlight code and detect vulnerabilities in real time, defining things like quality issues and having it suggest fixes for those. The next thing is around our deployment analyzer agent. And this is a really great thing that allows you to actually ask the deployment why it failed and provide guidance on how to fix it, rather than having directly dig into the logs to look for the issue. In essence, really what we're trying to do here is commit to innovation around AI and really help streamline your Salesforce development process. Now I'm going to hand things over to Michael here. He's going to give you a quick intro into Provar, and then we'll dive into the demo. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Patrick. So I'm going to be very briefly just going through a couple of slides here because I know we're all kind of anxious to get to the demo side of things. So first I'll just introduce Provar. For those of you that don't know who we are, we've been around here about 11 years now, and our company was founded with the sole purpose of creating a better solution for testing Salesforce. But we've expanded that vision much more since then to be more well-rounded in the end-to-end testing space. So Salesforce is definitely kind of our centralized testing platform. However, we do allow for testing in other areas as well. We are a globally recognized company with employees and clients around the globe. And I'll get into kind of the primary challenge, I guess the problem statement that we typically see around automated testing platforms that are either generic or not suited for testing Salesforce. Really, it's these 3 points: complexity, reusability, and scalability. With complexity, really what we're referring to is there's a lot of complex scenarios that you're wanting to automate, right? And doing that with something like Selenium usually ends up being piecemealed approach where you're using one automation tool for your web interfaces. You're maybe using Postman or something else like that to test your APIs. You're doing a lot of your manual steps in between. And really, it's just this high level of fragility because of the complex nature of the test cases. That leads to tests not being reliable and very slow process in terms of actually building out those test cases. So reusability is another aspect that we like to focus on. When you look at automated testing, I have a Selenium background, so I'm quite familiar with this one. While the code itself is highly reusable, and of course we can utilize object-oriented principles and things like that, the simple fact is that if you're testing one application, being able to port that code to another application to test it there just doesn't work that way in Selenium because of the way page locators operate and because of the way that Salesforce renders environments differently and profiles and personas and different layouts and things like that. So there's not a lot of reusability in terms of the actual web interface and what you're testing there. So you can't really cover all the different personas that you want to test with a single test case. That would require your scaling of that automated testing effort to be much higher than normal if you were using something like Provar to give you that flexibility. And scalability, of course, leads directly from what I was just saying in my previous point there. You're not able to scale out something like Selenium quickly enough because you either need to hire additional automation engineers, which don't come very cheaply, but you also need to be able to keep up with the pace of your development processes. Usually what we see with someone who's using more of a generic framework is that they're kind of reactive in the sense that the release gets deployed to their downstream environments, and then they're creating automation at the back end of that. But it's not really this in-sprint automation to where you're ready to go for the next release. You're always kind of playing catch up from the previous one. So it doesn't give you a lot of time to really expand there. And now where Provar fits into this. So I've kind of given you the problem statements and outlined those. Provar is, again, an end-to-end test automation solution built for speed and scale for Salesforce-centric applications. Really what we mean by that is our sole focus for existing is to cut down on that manual testing time, but also to increase your coverage for automated testing if you're coming from Selenium or something like that as well. So you can see some stats here at the bottom from some of our existing customers: 80% reduction in automation maintenance effort from Canada drives, which was a pretty big reduction there if we're looking from a Selenium going into Provar. So really we're talking about scaling out by reducing those maintenance costs. Now, where do those maintenance costs typically come from? This slide here is something that we put together to kind of illustrate this concept of complexity in the Salesforce testing world. Now, I know it's a lot of text on the screen, which generally I try to avoid, but I'm really trying to communicate here is that there's a lot of things that you're wanting to test in the Salesforce ecosystem. It's not just at the UI level. Really, what the UI covers is kind of just the tip of the iceberg, right? But as you get further into testing Salesforce and your scenarios are incredibly more complex, there's a lot of different things that you're wanting to include in as part of that testing process. So Provar allows you to go deeper and test what's really underneath the covers in your Salesforce implementation to give you greater stability and greater coverage overall. So really that's all I'm trying to highlight here is that we're trying to accelerate that process by giving you more coverage and scalability efforts. Okay, as I said, and as I promised there, I'm not going to spend too much time on those slides. I want to move forward to the integration aspect of this because that's why we're here today, is to really talk more into why Provar and Flosum are working together. First of all, it's a natural fit. For those of you that have been in the DevOps space for some time, you know that you can't have DevOps without testing and you can't have test automation without DevOps. So the two really go together, kind of like peanut butter and jelly, I would say. And also, we're both a very Salesforce centric solution. So being Salesforce native is of course important if you're looking for something and you're utilizing the Salesforce platform. You want to make sure the tools that you're adopting are native to that platform, which makes sense. So the fact that we're both catered for the Salesforce ecosystem and built on the Salesforce platform gives us that natural fit for integration. And also, we already have over 24 existing joint clients that utilize both of our solutions, whether they're integrating them directly or through third parties. Those clients are there for reference as well. Now, I want to move into more of a kind of a technical discussion and kind of an outline here. So I'm going to hand it back over to Patrick, who will kind of outline the dev test ops process.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks a lot, Michael. And back to that previous slide, why we have so many joint customers, the feedback that we constantly get is that the complexity is just so great. We want flexibility between our CD and our testing vendors. And I think really Flosum and Provar really offer that. We have others in the space, some of our competitors out there that really lock you into their methodologies behind CD or testing. But the reason why those customers have went with us is because of the flexibility that we can provide and the breadth of our solutions from a technical standpoint, which you'll see in the overall demo. But yeah, back to the CI/CD and why testing is important across the whole software development lifecycle. You need a robust solution to really be able to enable software delivery, and that's really what it comes down to. And testing is a critical part within the overall SDLC. The thing here is being able to have those integrations tightly intertwined and allow these tool sets to work together to streamline workflows and improve efficiencies here. The big thing is planning, so you can do some automated deployment and validations and ensuring the deployments will be validated before the execution. And then I talked about version control earlier, about seamlessly integrating with version control systems for better code management. So we can either do native version control or we can tap into your current version control workflows to be able to pull those into Flosum. The build phase is huge around things like static code analysis and pull request management, and then also the integrations with Provar there. And then Michael will get to that as well. Michael, do you want to chat about the testing piece? Because I think that's really important as you start running and building on a good maturity model through automated deployments.
Yeah, absolutely. And as with any DevOps process, we know that it's cyclical, and that's kind of where the build, test, release process is very iterative over time. So we see a natural integration in the pre-deployment process, but also in post-deployment and dealing with those rollbacks and conflict resolutions. So, of course, Flosum can assist with that side of things, but for the actual execution of the test cases and the end-to-end tests, you would use something like Provar to enable your team to be able to do what we call in-sprint automation. So you have your user stories, you have your development, you have your build coming down the pipeline, and you want to be able to begin the automation efforts for something that hasn't yet been deployed to the next environment. So that's what we're referring to with in-sprint automation, is to really kind of tie the development and the testing efforts as closely as we can, which will speed up the overall process, which will prevent those delays further on where you're kind of waiting for the testing to happen. I know we've all been a part of those projects where everything's done, it's built, but then you have to wait for it to be tested, right? So having to wait is no fun, and having to delay your releases is even less fun. So utilizing something that is more full stack testing, testing APIs, testing databases, testing, of course, your web interfaces, Salesforce, and even email gives us that capability to cover the whole gambit of what you might be deploying through Flosum or otherwise, and to be able to wrap those results back into the pipeline so that when you come to the release phase, you can make an intelligent decision whether or not you want to do a rollback, whether or not you want to deploy further downstream.
Yep. And the seamless integration portion is super important here. And it goes back to a little bit about that maturity modeling that I was talking about before. Like, you don't need to do full automation on day one. I mean, you can walk before you run as you start adopting a model like this. But I think this is a really good visual that explains how CD and also testing are both critical components of a software development lifecycle.
Absolutely. The last bit here, I'll switch over to a new diagram here to kind of guide you through what we're going to be showing off in the demo. I tried to illustrate this in sort of a sequential manner, but as we all know, some things happen in parallel when you're working on a development or a DevOps team. So you can picture this as kind of the day in the life of a DevOps team. So we have Flosum and we have the two Provar products. So one is a Provar Manager. That's our Salesforce native product. That's where we integrate with tools like Flosum. We do our reporting, we do our dashboards in Salesforce and all of that, which I'll show you. And then we have the automation piece of it, which for those of you that may have heard of Provar before, this is the piece that you've probably seen where we do the actual test case development, integrate into Git, and do our execution and all of that. So the way that all this works is, you have your feature requests coming in from the invisible left-hand side here, and that gets mapped to a user story, and those user stories are mapped into Flosum. So once those user stories are created, that gives you, your set of work, what you're actually going to be developing or working on as the developer or the admin. And then in tandem with those user stories, you begin the test case creation process, whether that's initially just creating a manual test case and then going into the automated phase. And then the next phase is organizing those into, structural units that we call test plans. So a test plan is just a grouping of test cases that you want to execute in a target environment on a certain condition, such as a different browser or an operating system or something like that. And you can even schedule those as well. But from the Flosum perspective, we're going to be kicking those off from a deployment. So we have the branch created in Flosum, which of course has all of our manifest or our deployment records that we're going to be deploying to the downstream environment, all the metadata information that we're going to be deploying. That's tied to those test cases directly in Provar. So that gives us the capability to, once we perform that deployment, kick off those test executions automatically down here at the bottom. And then we have the quality gate. So this is probably the most important piece of all this in the integration with Provar and Flosum. This quality gate allows us to make a deployment, run test cases, and then do a check. So this check is basically going to be a certain threshold that you can configure. For our test purposes, we just set it to 80%. So essentially, if 80% of our test cases are passing, then we can either make the decision to deploy further into the pipeline, or we can create a bug, do a rollback, whatever the case may be. So, there's going to be actionable data at the end of this, usually some additional steps that you're going to take either from a manual perspective, or if you have a fully blown, sophisticated pipeline that's automated, then all of that could be built in as well. So that gives you an idea of what we're going to be demoing today. I'm going to go ahead and switch gears into the demo. So let me do that here now. Okay, so starting things off, I'm going to let Mayank kind of talk through this, and I'm going to drive the wheel. So Mayank, if you want to kind of guide us through the Flosum steps.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. So what we are seeing here is the Flosum interface. As Patrick mentioned, we are a 100% native Salesforce application. So what you are seeing here is pretty much like any Salesforce application that you might develop. And we have our orgs. Let's say that you are working with the development orgs, QA orgs, UAT production, all of them connected to your Flosum application within Salesforce. And let us say you have been working in one of your development orgs on a particular user story. And there are various ways that we can pull components that you have changed for your user story into Flosum. One way is we can do it automatically for dev pro sandboxes, where as changes happen in the org, utilizing Salesforce's source tracking feature, we automatically pull those components into Flosum. The other is we can create a snapshot, which allows you to pretty much pull from any org, whether it's production, full copy sandbox, etc. So you can click on that create snapshot button, and it allows you to give various filter criteria, like how far back you modified your components, what type of components you are looking for, name changed by, etc. So either ways, either using source tracking where things are pulled automatically or utilizing the snapshots, you can retrieve components from your development sandbox, for example, or development environment into Flosum for your user story. So let's open a snapshot, Michael, that we have. Yeah. Great. So this is the list of various snapshots we have pulled. And let's say here is a snapshot where we just pulled in a couple of components into Flosum. So yeah, if we click on the related tab, we can see the components that are pulled into this particular snapshot for, let's say, this user story. And then we can take the snapshot and we can see on the top right, there's a commit to branch button. So clicking on that allows us to move these components. And if by any chance we have pulled more components, this screen allows us to cherry pick which components are actually a part of our user story and move them into the branch. And you can either create a new branch from the screen or you can select a pre-existing branch to move to. So yeah. And then yeah, let's move on to our branch. So here now, if we go into the manifest tab, Michael, yeah, we can see that the components or component that, let's say, we needed for our user story, we have it listed out here. You could have destructed changes, any manual steps, etc., as we can see. And there's a whole bunch of other features that we could do here with a Flosum branch. But since we are focusing on our Provar integration, do we have pipeline open, Michael, that we can also show? So Flosum has this concept of pipelines which help you to string together various operations. So here we have a very simple pipeline, which is just showing you that the first step is it does a deploy to a particular org. And once that deploy is successful, then it just kicks off Provar and runs a whole bunch of test cases that are defined for this branch to see whether our deployment, let's say, broke any regression test cases that we might have had. Right. So again, in a Flosum pipeline, you can add all kinds of other operations like validates and peer reviews and everything. But just because we want to be focused here, we did that. And again, the steps can be sequenced in any way that we want to. So for example, here we said we'll do a deploy to a particular org, and then we are going to check whether that particular org, any regression tests are, let's say, failing. But I could have a pipeline where my first step would be that I check for my tests in my development org to make sure that all my regression tests or functional tests are working. And then I do my deployment into my, let's say, QA org. And then I again run maybe a different set of tests or same tests on QA to see how it is doing in QA after it has been deployed there. So, Michael, do you want to just show how to set up the tests in Provar?
Yeah. So thank you for that, Mike. So kind of the natural integration point and kind of the time where you would, all this is kind of happening in parallel as I discussed in my diagram previously. So you have the changes coming in, you have the branch once it's committed from the snapshot of the changes that you're capturing in those orgs. Then you would want to relate what you're doing in Flosum to Provar. So we have an integration plugin that allows us to do this directly on the branch record. So you can go to the test tab here and create a relationship between the test cases that you've created in Provar and the branches that you have in Flosum. And now the reason why this is important in creating this relationship is that, as we showed you in the pipeline, once that deployment has been made, we want to be able to kick off specific test cases as part of that pipeline process. So we can specify that individually here at the test case level, Or if we don't want to do it granularly, we could also just attach the test plan itself, and that will allow us to kick off the entire test plan, which will run the suite of test cases rather than individuals. So either way, the results will be reported back into Flosum here, so we get that closed loop process. And as Mike was pointing out in the pipeline, we can use that integration as a checkpoint to further deployments. So we can check whether or not the tests were deployed successfully, but we can also do a quality gate on once the org has been deployed. For example, here to this environment, before we run on dev, we can run the test cases on the previous one and then check the results there. So we have all of that integrated directly into the Flosum application. But let me show you as well what it looks like from the Provar side. So we have our Salesforce application inside of the same org that we have our Flosum installation in. This is Provar Manager. And this is kind of our dashboard here that shows our quality center dashboard that shows the breakdown of our test executions by different testers, by types, by browser, etc. And we can also show a list of our defects and everything like that, as well as our coverage that we have for our applications. Now I'm looking at the Dev1 sandbox because that's the primary developer sandbox that we're using for this Flosum demonstration. So right now we can see the kind of the results for the past few days. We can see for this week individually, we have 0 failures today, which is great. So we knew that this demo would work flawlessly. So we have all that set up here inside of Provar. But let me show you kind of what an existing record looks like. So what I'll do before I get to that piece of it is I'm going to go ahead and kick off the pipeline from the branch. Now I'm just going to go ahead and run our demo pipeline and click run here. Now what this will do is a number of things, right? First, it's going to do the deployment to this target org that this pipeline has configured. So this will be our Dev1 sandbox. Then it's going to run the Provar test cases in that same org. So we have that logical link between the org that we're deploying to and the org that we're testing, rather than running it on, a random environment. So these orgs are related. The branches and the test cases are also related. So following up on this deployment, it will do a check on all the test cases, and then we can configure it to run further downstream. So we can see here it's currently in progress on this environment. If I go to our deployment history here, I'll be able to see that we currently have the deployment showing in progress. So again, once that's shown as success, we'll be able to see those test cases kick off, and then we have our automation step here, which will check the results of those tests. I can look at a previous run here to show a failure and what that looks like. So I have a result from yesterday where we show here this automation step failed. So this is actually where some of our test cases weren't passing. We didn't meet that threshold. So in this case, the pipeline failed. So you would have a conditional step here on whether or not you want to roll back those changes to that environment, or if you want to go forward with the release. So you can configure all that to be manually done or built in as automation. But let me go ahead and do a quick refresh here. I think this takes a couple minutes to deploy, but once that's completed, we'll see the pipeline kick off. What I would like to do is show you an existing run, so we're not waiting on that one. If I go over to Provar, I can see I have a run from before. So this is where I did the same deployment, and this was running on my Dev1 sandbox org. So I can take a look at that job here. Now that job inside of Provar will show a number of different things. It'll show all the different threads that we're running here. So we've parallelized this. So because we had 4 test cases linked to that branch, it's automatically split those tests across 4 different machines to run them in parallel to speed up my execution through our execution platform. And then we can take a look at the pass rate here and in our test cycle. And we can also look at each of those individual test cases and their results. So we'll see the status here. We'll also see a breakdown. If we go further into the test execution, we can see the individual test steps and the results here, as well as any screenshots or even a video recording of that test execution if we want to watch that back. So all this is in the same org that our Flosum installation is in. So we get real-time kind of integration, but also communication between all the records that Provar is creating and all the records that Flosum is creating. So we have that closed loop process of reporting capabilities and all of that built into the pipeline. So let me go back over to our branch real quick and just see. Yep. So now that's showing as passed. So that deployment succeeded and our tests have been ran successfully. So our deployment is now done on that particular environment. So now you can set this up in a number of different ways. For this demonstration, because I'm doing it manually, now I can make the decision if I want to run my next pipeline, which is going to run on another environment here. So this will basically just do the same thing, but it's going to do the check for the test cases in the previous org before it deploys further downstream. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of how the integration works and what everything looks like in Flosum. Mike, did you have any final points here on any of this?
Yes, as Mike mentioned, the pipelines can be very flexible in terms of where these operations are being run. You can string together all the various orgs you have in terms of dev, QA, UAT, all the way to prod if you're brave enough for that. And with the test results coming back to Flosum, the pipelines have that quality gate built in, where if the test results are not meeting the threshold at any point in time, the pipeline will stop right there, and you can do your fixes, etc., and then move forward again.
Yeah, and from this, this is just for demo purposes. We put this in here just to kind of show the reflection of those test cases passing. This is a checkbox. So in practice, this would be, an actual sliding scale. This would be like a percentage value, probably, to show you the actual percentage of the pass rate on the tests inside of Flosum. But we already have that in Provar, so we can link it here. This is just for demo purposes that we've added that in there. But otherwise, you go to your test tab here and you can see your most recent executions. And you can also see, you can go directly to those executions rather. So if I want to look at this test execution for this record, it takes me directly to that, and I can view all the same things that I was viewing from the Provar side without having to switch applications or anything like that. Okay, so let me switch back over into our slides here really quickly. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Lauren, who's going to do a quick recap and kind of just give us a high-level overview of the value prop of the joint partnership here.
Perfect. Thanks so much. So hopefully we've shown you how to unleash the power of Flosum and Provar through a number of ways, namely end-to-end Salesforce DevOps automation that completely eliminates bottlenecks. And I'm just reading the first one here. Flosum's secure release management and Provar's intelligent low-code test automation ensures smooth, risk-free deployments with thorough automated testing at every step. Another way is through accelerated release cycles by speeding past the competition. Flosum streamlined change management combined with Provar's automated testing dramatically reduces time to production, ensuring rapid delivery of new features and innovations. Another way is through unmatched testing with confidence that completely removes the guesswork. Provar's powerful test automation framework delivers unbeatable UI and back-end validation, making every Flosum deployment rock solid in performance, security, and functionality. And lastly, of course, ironclad security with quality deployments, so you can deploy with confidence. Flosum ensures strict compliance and governance, while Provar catches defects before they impact your live environment, so every release is bulletproof. So hopefully we showed you that today. And then we're now coming up with great timing, and you can move to the next slide, on our Q&A session. We already have a bunch of questions, so we can start reading those off. You can go ahead and ask them in the chat or the QA. We prefer the QA just to streamline it. And let's get started with those questions. First one. So I have about 10 developers, let's just say 50 stories. About how many testers do I need? I guess the Provar team. Questions for you.
That is a great question. So obviously it kind of depends on what your developers' agility is. Of course, if you have 10 developers creating 50 stories, as you said, if that's like your typical sprint is going to have 50 stories in it, then you probably need a good number of testers to compensate. The usual ratio that I kind of see quite often is kind of like 3 to 1. So you'll maybe have 3 developers to 1 tester. Now that obviously can vary based on the tester's capacity and whether or not they're using an automated tool, for sure. If they're doing manual testing, then you would definitely need more than the typical 3 to 1 ratio in most cases to keep up.
How did we switch from Flosum Org to Provar Test Manager?
Just a different app. So you can open up App Launcher, and just type in Provar. So there it is. So that's it.
This next question's a little bit long. I'm going to read it. Fairly new to Provar, still in the journey. Have a question around self-healing elements, Xpaths. Rather than using the default Xpath given by Provar X when adding steps to test case, if I change the Xpaths by writing something on my own, still targeting the same element, will that also self-heal?
Yeah, so the self-healing that we usually refer to is, we kind of do it in multiple ways. So the first method that we handle traditional self-healing is through our metadata support for Salesforce. So when you map something that's metadata enabled, a field that's metadata enabled, then there really is no need for self-healing. So we say that it's self-healing, but in reality, it's a dynamic locator. So it actually doesn't ever need to self-heal it. It automatically generates the correct locator at runtime based on the metadata for that particular layout and field. For the other use cases where you've already created a custom page object, custom locator in Provar for something that's not natively supported through the metadata, you can self-heal that through our NitroX framework, which allows you to create basically a library of locators for given elements to fall back on if one is no longer sufficient. If you've modified that, you can still utilize that feature, but you would need to go into Test Builder and do a quick refresh on that element to get it to recognize it. So hopefully that answers that from those two avenues.
Okay, diving into the next one. How much of coding knowledge is required to make use of Provar?
I would say zero coding knowledge is required to make use of it. It does help to have a testing background to get the concepts of QA and testing, not necessarily test automation background. You could just be a manual tester. But there is a learning curve for anybody. But we do have University of Provar, which is kind of our trailhead for testing and QA in Salesforce. If you want to get started there, that would be my recommendation to kind of see what Provar has to offer. It's all free. So you can register provar.me and go there and find out how to use it.
And that was kind of a two-part question, which you may have touched on the answer, but specifically, do you have record and playback capabilities while building the automation test?
Yeah, so the way that Test Builder works, it's different than traditional record and playback. Record and playback, usually the way they work is you execute a bunch of steps that are recorded, and then you play back the entire scenario. The way that Provar works is actually you're building out the steps iteratively. So as you go, and you're getting real-time feedback as you go. So it's playing it back. So it's kind of a live debugger in that sense. We generally recommend that approach as it comes to test automation because that gives you less time back and forth. Recording the whole thing, playing back the entire scenario can be timely, and having to maintain that is no fun. So we kind of give you the best of both worlds there.
And then this one might be for Flosum. Can Flosum report on completed deployments?
Yes, absolutely. Not only can we report on completed deployments, but if, let's say, you have feature branches that are associated with Jira or Agile Accelerator, etc., user stories, we can report at the level of when a particular component was deployed, where it was deployed, why was it deployed, with that link to the Jira or Agile Accelerator, etc., user stories. So yes, there's a great amount of detail in terms of auditing capabilities that you have built into Flosum.
And I noticed, Mayank, you were answering on the QA. I just want to read this one out loud around integrated products. Maybe you can touch on that from both a security side and maybe just what tools does Flosum integrate with in general?
I believe the question was, what is the security part of DevSecOps? How is that being taken care of? So Flosum has some products like Trust Center and Flosum Scan, which allow you to do static code analysis or scan and analyze your Salesforce orgs for vulnerabilities. And if, let's say, you want to bring your own scanning tool to the table, like SonarQube, you can do that as well. We integrate there. And similarly, we integrate with a host of change management solutions like Jira, ServiceNow, Azure DevOps, Agile Accelerator, etc. So, and then of course, Provar we integrate with in terms of ensuring that all your functional regression testing is in place, so you are not sending out any buggy code that could result in downtime or vulnerability.
Another one, can we customize the automation process using any programming language?
I can answer to that in the context of Flosum, that Flosum does have something called the automation step within the pipeline. That is basically a Salesforce flow that you can trigger, and then the flexibility of Salesforce flows. So from there, you can call an Apex class. From the Apex class, if you want, you can call pretty much any REST endpoint that you want to call. So in that way, you can, but can you directly code in Java inside of Flosum, for example? No, because it is native to Salesforce and you can't really code in C++ Java in the Salesforce platform. But that would be the approach you would need to take if you need to take that approach. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess if you apply that same question to Provar, the answer is you can't. Provar is built on a Java-based platform, so we utilize Java behind the scenes. So if you do want to customize any of your tests or test scripts, you can do that with Java.
And Michael, I'll follow up on that one sort of. To run parallel tests across multiple browsers, does Provar need multiple licenses?
It depends on how you're doing that parallelization. You can do it through our native cloud execution. So if we provide that, then you would need additional licensing to support that model. But if you're hosting your own version of that, then the licensing is going to differ, of course, slightly in that use case because you're bringing your own infrastructure. But either way, we kind of support you through that process by providing execution licenses, typically with developer licenses out of the box. So we try not to make that a huge hurdle for people.
Is Provar planning to make dynamic Xpaths? Example, enabling use of variables in Xpaths.
Yeah, you can do this today. You can do this through one of two ways. So NitroX supports this capability through having parameterized locators that we call them. But you can also use page object operations, which are basically just methods within your page objects that you create within Provar. And you can pass in a string parameter that is basically, in your example, the industry would be kind of your parameter, and you could parameterize that to be something like agriculture, technology, etc.
Mayank, this one's for you. Does Flosum integrate with Git solutions? And if so, which?
Yes, Flosum does have an integration with pretty much all the common flavors of Git. So GitHub, GitLab, Azure, DevOps, to name a few, Bitbucket. So yeah, we do integrate. We have lots of clients who do that as due to compliance reasons, etc.
And Michael, this one's for you. How are the test cases being executed when the code is deployed? Is it pre-validation or post-validation?
Both. So in the example that we showed, we're kind of beginning in the Dev 1 sandbox. And in that case, it's a post-validation because the changes haven't been made yet. But going forward, it'll be a pre and a post. So we'd run the changes prior to deployment downstream, and then we'd run them after they've been deployed to the next environment.
What is the difference between Provar and other test automation solutions on the market?
Yeah, so some of the things that I highlighted kind of in the slides were really just the fact that we're built for the Salesforce platform, built to handle the complexities, the different personas, the different environments that you may have in Salesforce, all the different Salesforce clouds. Supporting all those natively out of the box is a big reason to choose Provar if Salesforce is a large part of your testing kind of framework. But like I said, we do end-to-end testing through APIs, web, database, email, etc. So having that Salesforce native capability and alignment with Salesforce releases is a big part of kind of what makes us different, because we have releases that coincide with each Salesforce release and kind of compatibility there.
Mayank, this one's for you. It's around Flosum permissions. At what level can they be assigned? Can it be role, profile? How does that work?
Yes, again, being native to Salesforce, you can utilize the full power of Salesforce. So you can do profiles, you can do permission sets. Flosum has its inbuilt security roles at a fairly granular level also. So for example, you can say that, okay, this individual can deploy to their own dev sandbox, but they cannot even touch the production environment, and maybe they can validate against QA, but they can't deploy to QA. So you have those levels of granular permissions available. What operations can people do? Are they allowed to commit code into the repository? So yeah, all that is available to you within Flosum as part of the application. Plus, you can refine it further since it is native to Salesforce. So if you want to add your own permissions or things like that, you can do that.
We do have a question around AI, and this is for Provar. Is there a plan to incorporate the use of AI into Provar?
Yeah, so we've already been doing this, and there are some features that are generally available today. There's also some that we're working on that we've showcased in another webinar previously that will be released soon, TBD. But the one that is released there is kind of around what you're talking about, the test data generation. So we have the capability in the tool today to be able to generate test data utilizing AI in a generative fashion. So up to 1,000 records at a time, you can create for test seeding for your sandboxes and things of that nature. The other features are usually to kind of correspond with our Agentforce testing capabilities. So we do things like utterance generation, which is just a kind of a fancy word to say like we create prompts for you to send to agents. And then intent validation is what you would use to basically have a dynamic validation in your automation. Because with testing AI, you don't necessarily know how it's going to respond. So having static validations in there, like specific strings and things like that, will not be sufficient because the AI is going to respond differently. So we do an intent validation to allow you to test agents in an interactive way.
Is it possible to test the Mulesoft integrations in Provar?
Yes. In fact, we did a kind of a feature Friday on Mulesoft testing, actually not too long ago, to showcase that. So we can test Mulesoft endpoints and APIs through Provar.
Yep, we got a lot of thank yous for answers. Very helpful and insightful. Perfect. So then going back to the slide deck, I would say we're at the end of our webinar. Couple of quick things we want to note is that there will be a follow-up email going out shortly with the recording and some details around how to get in touch with us and learn more about our partnership, our collaborative buying process, what's in it for you, the ability to speak to either of our companies individually. So we'll send that email out with links, and just be on the lookout in the next 24 to 48 hours. Thank you so much for joining today, and we hope you learned a few things. Take care, everyone.